I'd like to say how fabulous it is to be back, but Steve, it wouldn't be back without this. Welcome back, Steve.
Welcome back, Phil.
Well, let's try that again. Has everybody out there got their biblically approved beverage of choice? We do. It makes you look good and feel great. Hey, welcome, everyone. Let us know in the chat how you're doing, where you're from. Mary, Deb, great to see you out there. We've been offline for a while. Steve, what's been going on? Let me turn that music off. That's driving me crazy. There's some background music that I clicked on to try and be hip and tech.
Groovy.
It just drove me crazy. It was called, the theme track was called Into Space, and it was driving me spacey. Hey, Steve, tell us, well, first of all, welcome back to Australia, buddy. Where have you been for the last 3 months? What have you been up to?
Well, so for those of you who don't know, I have 3 sons, and my oldest son now lives in Germany. He moved over there 5 years ago. He then pretty soon thereafter got married, and now he has we have one granddaughter. She's 2 years old now. So,
and what's her name?
Annalise. So,
which is interesting,
folks. Gorgeous little girl.
Oh, I've seen photos, of course. Annalise is, and my granddaughter's name is Annalie. So it's easy to get these not mixed up, but you can see there's a sympathy between the families here, can't you?
Yeah, well, and I think that because, I mean, look, Livia, Sean's wife, fancy getting that mixed up. She has all her family in the town where they live, and so she's very sort of connected with her friends and family. It's a very tight knit family as well. So I can't see them moving to Australia anytime soon.
No, that can be hard.
But what they wanted to, they want to name their kids in a way that if they suddenly decide to live in Australia, that the names would sort of work in German and in English. So which kind of does. So that's cute.
Which is great. It's nice to have that transferable, neutral kind of name, unlike some Dutch names, which don't relate because you guys are German, of course, and Scottish, and you're a mixed breed of everything.
I'm not actually Scottish. I lived in Scotland, but just to set the record straight, I was born in London. My dad is English. My mum and dad are both not alive anymore. My dad was English, but he was from an Irish family, so Irish people tend to stick to their own. They do. And my mum was from Jewish background, so even she wasn't a sort of an Orthodox Jew, but she was nonetheless Jewish. And so after the Second World War, she had lost most of her family to, well, we won't get into why. Everybody knows why. And she went to England, and she thought she would stay there for the rest of her life. But it just so happened that my dad got a good job with IBM, and they told him he has to move to Germany. So, and we as kids thought, oh, great. So I was like 9 years old when we moved from the UK to Germany, and I lived there for 10 years. And that's actually where I first came into contact with the gospel. So, and then through a long string of circumstances, I got married. I moved to Scotland, lived in Scotland. All our kids were born there. And then eventually we moved to Australia, and all our kids actually grew up in Australia. So the youngest one was only 6 months when we arrived here. So,
yeah, wow. Yeah, I have a similar kind of story. I was born in Australia, raised in Australia, probably will die in Australia. All it misses is the travel and the international connections. Pretty similar.
Well, so really not much difference at all. So, and of course, when you have those international connections, they tend to sort of propagate, in the family in that sense.
Of course they do.
And so now we've got a granddaughter on the other side of the world. So we decided, because both Katya and I work, as in my wife and I, we both work from home. She's a bookkeeper, in my day job, I'm a programmer, and so so we both work from home. So we just organized with our prospective clients that we would just simply work from the other side of the world for that period of time. And we just had to organize our sort of daily meetings with clients in different time zones. But other than that, so we ended up actually having 2 weeks holidays in those 3 months. But really, we just shifted from here to there. And that way we could
kept working.
And we kept working. We literally arrived, had a day to get over jet lag, and then, started working, get set up over there at Katya's mum's house. And they were very happy to have us because they're kind of in their old age a little bit lonely as well. So that was really nice for them. And it was great. And we had therefore sort of, usually when we go and visit family, it's you've got 4 weeks and you've got like a solid chock-a-block calendar set up so that you actually needed a holiday when you come home from visiting family, because you only get to see them once every few years. And this time we didn't have that stress, of course, because we had heaps of time. So it felt like it was just we were integrating into normal German life. Well, normal is, of course, in an inverted commas, everybody has their own pain and stories to tell at the moment with collapsing economies and, lunatics in power at the levers of government levers, like all over the world.
You say that? I'm looking at the stuff that's going on in the world entertainment known as the wind up for the US elections in November. I can't believe the whole world is wrapped up in this, but it is. Was there much of that news in Germany?
Look, I mean, the German media unanimously absolutely think that Trump is Herr Hitler in reincarnation, and the collective hatred for anything that's remotely to the left of far left is just unbelievable.
You mean anything that's sort of not far left, anything to the right of the far left?
Yeah, sorry, anything to the right of far left is already a fascist these days. You can't have normal. Well, I mean, it usually goes like this in Germany at the moment. Like the people self-censor a bit like they do in most Western countries, because they're so worried about saying the wrong thing and being caught in a difficult conversation. They just don't say anything at all. And so usually it takes a little while. Maybe people have had 1 or 2 beers and then, things get a bit relaxed. And then, all of a sudden you hear the things that actually people believe bubble up to the surface. And frankly, never the twain shall meet, like the one side of the news media and then what people actually think. They're just two different universes. So it's quite funny.
I understand it. There's a schism, isn't there? There's a break. It's like this.
Inconceivable. 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 You keep using the word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
It's exactly right. The same in Australia. I'm sure it is in the States too. Like folks who are on the chat watching us at the moment, feel free to put comments in the chat pod and we'll get to those as well if there's things going on there. But, this year has been a continuation of a capstone of, the last 4 years of, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, if you've ever heard that phrase. And, we've had a lot going on with our family as well. So it's good to have you back on deck, Steve, because, earlier, and obviously I'm talking to the family community out there. Steve knows pretty much all my news, but, my mum passed away earlier this year. And, I've been busy being the executor of the estate and looking after getting the house sold, which has finally only just made it to the market now, September in Australia. So springtime, good time for a house sale, one might suggest. The leaves are out. Everything's looking beautiful. The house is looking pristine. Mum would have loved it. She'd love to come back for it, but she can't.
And no one has any money.
And no one has any money. And apparently the economy's
because the government's robbed us all.
The Australian government in New South Wales has done a fantastic thing as well with one of our ministers, Tanya Plibersek. There was a gold mine that had been planned, like a $1 billion gold mine, not huge, but substantial, good for regional economies and things like that. And it was blocked, even though it had been given approval by the Aboriginal Land Council and the local government council to go ahead, because there was another schism in the Aboriginal Land Council of a smaller group that the locals didn't know about, who said that their ancestors woke them up one night and said, help us, don't let them dig in our ground. And that went through to the minister, and the minister has blocked the mine going ahead at this late stage, even though it was slated for approval.
Apparently, Phil, the latest is she's frantically backpedaling on her bicycle. The so-called Aboriginal Land Council that had this dream, of course, I think it was in the University of Western Sydney, where
but that's nowhere near where this is.
In the Department of Marx, sort of, somewhere in that area. So, because the ironic thing, right, is that all the in-country Australia, the Aboriginal community was saying, yes, please, let's have this mine, because it's like it's a win-win for them financially.
Absolutely,
it just
land council. So Australia, folks, if you're not watching from Australia has what is called Aboriginal Land Councils, and they're kind of like cultural advisory boards. And probably similar in some ways to, but different powers to what American Indians would have. And by that, I don't mean Apu and his family who settled from India in America. Obviously, we're talking about, Apaches.
Native Indians.
Can you say the word native? I can.
Well, I did. There you go.
Oh, my gosh. But the thing is, they have, quite a lot of sway, and they have some rights, and they can lease out land that they kind of own but don't own, or I'm not quite sure of the exact stuff that legally goes on. But if a mine wants to set up on their site, they get leasing rights for it. So there's money for those folks there, substantial money. But if another warring tribe, maybe that's a bit too redneck to say that, but if they're, if another land council or people from the city who tend to be activists turn up and want to say something because they've got, a need for money or whatever, or just want to stir up trouble, they do it very well. One side pitted against the other, and
it seems to me like the Aboriginal groups in the cities are just mindless robots, because they're paid by the political left to have a certain opinion, and if they would diverge from that opinion, then those payments dry up, so they don't diverge from those opinions. Whereas the Aboriginal people in the country, they don't. Their opinions are mostly aligned with the free market. When the free market gives them some good profit, then of course they'd be stupid to say no, and which is they generally don't. And so but of course the media will highlight the branded version of the Aboriginal opinion. That comes out of the university in the city, because that aligns with, the general leftist ideals that come out of Canberra. So and most people can see right through it. It's just a stupid game that doesn't help anyone really, because the people on the ground are the people who live where the mine is, not with the people who
that's right
out of the university.
Hey, I have a question, Steve. You talked about the people on the ground. Are there any people not on the ground? Okay, so I'm stirring. That's what is. I know I'm a connector of the dots, and you're a stirrer of the pots. I think I swapped our roles there. Oh, look, I'm looking at.
So, I just wanted to say, I was talking briefly about Germany, then I'll shut up about Germany. But I just wanted to say, Katya and I, as my wife and I, we have some good friends in a town where our son lives.
Yes.
One of these is a lady. She's Catholic, but she's a very sincere Christian, and I mean that with all, I really sincerely mean that. I don't think she's fooled by Catholic doctrine, and they're very much in her area. There is nothing else. It's not like, in America where you can, choose from a menu of 20 different churches in every town and say, I'll go to this one or that one. There is no such thing in the south of Germany. Yeah, and so she mourns all the problems that exist in the Catholic Church. And she's, she reads Augustine, she reads Aquinas, and then she reads the Bible as well. So she's a really interesting character. And anyway, she's always been a sort of moderate leftist, the typical sort of moderate kind of you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
socialist kind of German that's not really into socialism. It's just into the government doing some good things for people, but otherwise the government she's probably more like a left-leaning libertarian, I would say, even though she probably doesn't even understand what that term means. And now she finds herself aligning with the views of the AfD, even though she wouldn't come out with them publicly. So the AfD is the what's called the Alternative für Deutschland, and the German media tout them as the new German Nazi party. I'm slightly exaggerating, but it's because, as I said, anything to the right of the far left in Germany is already
that's
just
the same anywhere. If I
demonized.
was to look at the most left thing that I've watched recently, was I watched the Muppets, Dr. Teeth in the Electric Mayhem Band, playing a live gig in San Francisco. That's about as far left as I'll probably ever
But the
go.
funny thing is, right, and so there is an irony in all of this, and I think as Christians we need to be very painfully aware of this. In that the so-called conservative freedom movement of the world has some very, very dangerous, what I would actually call far-right elements in it.
It's possible. Christians need to transcend politics. Yeah,
we do. Well, but we need to be aware of it, and yet you're right. We do need to transcend it. So while I was in Germany, a group of undercover journalists got into one of the really far right, the really truly far right organizations that are actually sort of hiding in the pews of the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD. And they had a secret meeting where they put together a document of how to rid Germany from over 2 million undesirables. And the irony of all of this, I mean, it's not irony, it's not funny, it's actually really deadly dangerous. They met at a hotel in Wannsee. Now, if anybody who knows German history, there was a famous meeting that was arranged by the SS, as in the leader of the SS arranged this meeting, got all his secret cronies together, and this was the plan hatched, a famous plan that was how to rid Europe from its Jew problem. And their plan was, unlike what we know as the 6 million Jews who died, this plan actually contained the plan to kill 21 million undesirables. Most of these are Jews, but they also contain, homosexuals and, anybody that was undesirable to the Nazi ideals, gypsies, people, communists, anything that was in any way, shape or form undesirable to them. 21 million, that was their plan. And it was done in a particular hotel, in a particular place in the suburbia of Berlin. And guess what? This group, there's no way that this was not deliberate, that they met in that hotel.
Very symbolic.
So there are some really seriously dangerous undercurrents in all of this, which is why, as a Christian, you have to be really aware. Like there are also some really dangerous undercurrents, I think, in America that are particularly anti-Semitic, that sort of come back to this idea that all the world's problems are centered in some tiny group of Jewish people who are controlling the world, who literally, like a robot, control every lever in the world, which is a ridiculous idea. And yet that's what so many people now believe in the sort of, what I would call, that's the true far right.
Yeah, that's quite extreme. I think as Christians, we need to be aware that our politics should come out of our scriptures. And really, there are some things in conservative politics that, and I tend to think more things in the conservative politics that are sympathetic to biblical beliefs. And there are some things, compassionate type things, that are potentially have their, a grounding in biblical things, because the left now is not what it used to be. I think people can well agree with that, where you had left parties 50 years ago that were meant to be the parties of the working man, the small guy, whatever. And you can get swept up in that. And then you have, the right was meant to be big business. Well, things have changed. These two big teams, broadly around the world, Australia, America, the UK, they've roughly stayed the same. But what's happened inside those schools, houses, whatever, has changed dramatically. The water inside the left has gone radically wild, and the water inside the right has had some good stuff going on, but also, should be aware, Christians at least should be aware that we just don't holus bolus give our affiliation to any secular organization without, first of all, filtering it through scriptures, because we transcend those and we critique those and we talk back to those things. So whether you're in Australia, we talk about Labor and Liberal, as in Labor is the lefties, Liberal, ironically, are the conservatives. In the States, of course, you've got the Democrats and the Republicans. And in the UK, what have we got? We've got Labor and the Tories. They're all a bit of a mishmash these days. There's probably more of a need for us to be aware, just for our own sake, of not being drawn in and not being used as pawns. Being aware,
look, absolutely,
where the money is in these things.
So you have this kind of really strong, on the one hand, you've got Christian nationalists in America, and then you've got the sort of extreme version of that, because not everybody is, the Christian nationalist sort of slogan, I think, catches a lot of people who have got very diverging and different opinions. So it's really difficult to actually know what people think, just because somebody might use that term. You've got these kind of, theonomist dominionists, which are sort of on the very extreme side of the brand. And then, you would be amiss not to know that if you look at, let's say, I don't know, an early church father called Augustine, whom I think everybody as a Christian at some point in their life should read. You've got his book, The City of God, The City of Man, where he clearly makes this strong distinction between the world and the church. And look, I think the Reformation built on that. I don't think that was the be all and end all of theory. I think Luther largely sort of, because he was an Augustinian monk, of course, so he would have been steeped in Augustine. And I think, to be honest, the period of Luther and Calvin, they were so busy with restoring the gospel, you can't expect them to have thought about every single possible problem that the Christian church was going to engage with.
You deal with what's present at the time, and you have to think contextually about those things. I don't think good theology ever in any way adds to scripture. Good theology is always going to be a reformation.
Well, it's developing, in some sense. But I think there's some very good things to be learned from a Dutch prime minister called Abraham Kuyper, or Kuyper.
Kuyper,
and he sort of, came up with this, idea. Well, he didn't really come up with it. I think he just articulated better than other people did, of sphere sovereignty, as in, the idea that the church has its sphere, the government has its sphere, the family has its sphere, education has its sphere, and there is a certain degree of autonomy that if this autonomy exists in each of those spheres, then a society can function well, and if this autonomy doesn't, then of course it doesn't function. And you have at the moment the state trying to be the church, everything. The family, the everything, and of course, and the church sadly bowing to the pressure of the state largely, and that of course is, I don't think any of the reformers would have agreed with that.
Well, that's right. Well, they're bowing to it and flirting with it at the same time in different parts of, Christianity, as in like not Christianity, but it's part of the what's widely seen as the church. I thought that was quite interesting what, Clint has put up here. Clint, you're a very handsome man. I like how you've got that profile picture there. A well-trimmed mustache shows a man of dignity. But the idea that, a Bible-believing Christian, that should be, like standard, shouldn't it? How else can you be a Christian if you're not believing in the Bible? I think that's just...
And I think there's nothing wrong with being You know,
like
like there's
playing that.
nothing wrong with enjoying the country that you live in. I mean, you know, so if you're a person who believes the Bible, believes Jesus, and you believe that you want your nation to turn to God, well, then you're a Christian nationalist in some sense, because that you've caught all those terms. But the problem is that the left, of course, doesn't view that term in that way. Of course, defining terms is always such a really, really important thing. You know, so what's Lindsay saying? Yeah, there is a big handoff happening as far as duty goes from the church to so much the state becoming its own religion. Yes, absolutely. I agree. This is one of the fundamental problems of the monopoly, the state, that because the state has really, there's no appeal to, if you have a person in authority, let's say you have a local judge, and the local judge errs in his or her judgment, well, you can appeal to that local judge to somebody else. And of course, the idea of our initial, you know, Western civilizations were initially, of course, that we always appealed to God, in the sense that we always, you know, we always set our ideals, as in even every part of government, the idea was, of course, it would be this under God. In other words, we you know, we bow our knee to God's authority first and foremost. And of course, as the world, the secular world, has thrown that away, it's gone into disarray.
The world's always been a messy place, and that's not anything that should surprise us as Christians. If we get our playbook, the scriptures, and we look back at what's promised to us as believers, I mean, there are many things that are promised to us, but out of, you know, the mouth of Christ, trials, temptations, persecution, but also joys and great blessings as well. Like it's a mixed bag, and it's hard for us in the West, in some cases, most recently, where the world has been quite comfortable and quite benign or accommodating to the church, even though the church, to a large extent, has perhaps gone off boil and onto simmer in so many places, or even been taken off the heat and put on cold. You know, that idea of a lukewarm church. It's easy for secularists to tolerate lukewarm Christianity. That's a friend of the world in so many ways. You know, welcome for God ready to spit us out, holus bolus, because that's what he would definitely hate. But at the same time, we miss the fact that what the church might be entering into now, where we start seeing things not going our way, being very tricky, being difficult, having people hate us and persecute us, that's normal. And, you know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't appeal those things. We still live in republics and or democracies where apparently we have a voice and there are processes and we can appeal to those things. But Steve, I just want to really highlight your last point in there, that our highest court of appeal is God. And even if we don't make it out of this life having achieved justice for wrongs done to us, that will happen in eternity. So we should be always looking with those eternal eyes on, you know, the light afflictions that we face now will result in great eternal bliss and joy and glory. So, you know, even though we mix it up here, sorry.
But the thing is also, I think we are so, like in the West, we are quite, you know, for want of a better word, myopic, in the sense that, you know, for us, the church consists of the church in America, England, maybe Germany, although Germany is really just much more of a secular nation. You know, in the Western countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, those kind of countries. And we see that we see it in massive decline. Maybe not so much in America, but in in our countries, the church is in massive decline. And we sort of, you know what, that equals somehow the church globally is a massive decline, which is nothing could be further from the truth. It's not true at all. I mean, the church in China the underground church in China is growing at a rapid rate. The churches all over the sort of so-called, you know, what we would class as the places where we used to send missionaries. Like a friend of mine's a Baptist pastor who he's just headed off to Nepal. He goes there every year to train pastors, and they're training new pastors each time they go there. He goes there for a few weeks. He's part of a bigger Presbyterian organization, even though he's a Baptist, but that, you know, he doesn't mind because he's going there to teach them about the basics of Christianity. And they're planting churches at a rate like that. You just look at Australia and you think, oh, well, you know, like that's where it's all happening. And equally, the church in Africa, like, you know, I'm connected on Twitter or X with several African pastors who, just the other day, Conrad, I can't spell his surname. He's in Gambia or Zambia, Gambia. I think I get those countries mixed up. Sorry if you know the ones and you realize I've mixed them up. He sent me a short video of a conference of all these pastors in training there, and they were singing hymns, and then there was a snippet of preaching. Thousands of pastors, and you just think, like, yes, God is doing His work, wonderful. And we
should be encouraged.
We should be, and we should not forget that, you know, the reason why things are going downhill in our country is because our countries have turned away from God, and God is going to allow us to go through a period of suffering. That's true. The dispensationalist, of course, tells me that, oh, Jesus is coming next week, so it's all good. Well, you know, I don't buy into that theology. And in fact, I'm going to shamelessly plug a new book that I've been working on. While I was in Germany on a sort of sabbatical, I wrote
actually, book. Steve, before you do that, do you have the book cover, the draft book cover JPEG anywhere? I could show it on the screen.
No, I don't have. Remember that I'm working with your mate to produce that, so I don't have a book cover, so I can't. You know, I can't show you a nice fancy picture. But the title is "Did Jesus Predict the End of the World?" And I'll let you decide whether he did or he didn't after you've hopefully read my book. It's going to be published in September. It's a deep dive on the Olivet Discourse. It's not a short book, so it's quite long, but it looks at all the big sort of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the smaller minor prophets. What did they have to say about this period? It looks at where Jesus would have gotten the language from. I even had a go at writing an Australian poem, and there's a reason why I did. You know, poets who are good at poetry might laugh at my poem, but if you buy the book, you will see why.
You get that poem for free. It comes with it.
You will indeed. So I actually intend. So I've written. Oh dear.
Yeah, we'll do that, Deanne.
Hang on just a second. My phone is ringing. I'll be back in just a second.
That's all right. There will be no problem with that at all, Deanne, because what we've got, you can do. You would know, of course, print on demand if you like that, or Kindle to do an EPUB. That's where some of my books are as well. Now, I don't advertise my books on this channel because they're just fun. I do, 1960s British pop rock books. That's what I write, like a little bit of modern history stuff and a bit of fun. So I'm trying to get Steve to work with those as well. Oh, he's back. He's back. So we will definitely make sure that Steve has it on Kindle as well as print on demand.
Oh, yeah, it will be. So this was a book that I wrote. It's about Romans 13. How should the Christian how do you handle tyrannical government overreach? This was actually my university master's thesis that I turned into a book. And then I wrote this book, which I guess is trying to help people come out of the charismatic world and realize that what they had learned there in terms of the title of the book was actually just learned behavior, had nothing to do with the Holy Spirit, I'm afraid to say. And there's good reasons why. And I pull back all the veneer and look at every single passage of scripture and what it actually is trying to tell us. And so, I like to write books that help people. And the reason that the subjects that I generally choose are subjects that I have personally struggled with. And so that I guess is why I enjoy doing that. And so the book about the Olivet Discourse is, of course, also is to help people get away from this kind of, what I would call defeatist view of the future. Martin Luther was once asked, and I think this is an anecdotal quote. I cannot actually prove that he said this, but I still like the quote that I use it. I even use it in my book. He was once asked what he would do if he knew that Jesus was going to return today. And he said he'd go into the garden. It was a tongue-in-cheek comment, of course. He said he'd go into the garden and plant a tree. And so the point is that he said something of those along those lines. He may not have used those exact words, but the quote is largely attributed to him. And the point being is that he, like most reformers of his day, their eschatology may have been slightly different to ours today, and that's fine. But they had a long view of the future. Our job is the Great Commission, and the Great Commission isn't, bury yourself like a prepper into underground because the world is coming to an end in a third world war called Armageddon and all that. This is not going to happen, I'm afraid. I don't think the world is going to end like this, and the world may go on for another 1,000 years, for all we know. We don't know. The whole point about the message of the New Testament is that Jesus, in his humanity, didn't know. So it's entirely arrogant for other humans to suddenly somehow proclaim they do. That just doesn't comport, I think, with the text of Scripture. And
I think you're right there. It's been something that I've taken a journey on over the last 30 years or so, because the Christianity that I was brought into as a teenage convert, even though I, was part of an Anglican church family growing up, my conversion experience came when I was 16. Actually, I want to change those words. My conversion experience sounds like some hair shampoo I put on that made me better. God saved me when I was 16, basically. And
I got the wrong shampoo, obviously.
Did you feel it tingling? It's working. But the zeitgeist around me at that stage was all, Larry Norman's I Wish We'd All Been Ready, and the whole idea of this secret pulling away of the church, the harpazo, what do we
the late great planet Earth, you mean?
All those sort of things. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Lindsay. I read it.
Yeah, I remember doing stuff on that as well in high school. But the idea was that the church was going to be raptured somewhere, taken out by God, and there would be the 7 years of tribulation, of which the last 3.5 would be the great tribulation. It was all about us. It was all coming, and then Jesus would come back and wipe the whole thing out and start again. That is quite a misreading of Scripture from what I've come to learn in the last few years. And the idea of us going away and sort of waiting for God to come back or licking our wounds and she'll be right is more like no, let's actually get on the front foot and do the Great Commission, do what we're called to do. And you'd be surprised. I think the church has gone through cycles and cycles and cycles of this, because as individuals, we're very narrow. We have a short lifespan. We only see what we can see. We're a blip and we're gone. We are like dust. So it's those sort of things where I think, what's the long-term view? Because that would always be God's view of things. The Bible's always true. The Bible's always accurate. The Bible is always completely trustworthy. And our interpretations of that are the things that come and go. And this sort of area has, helped me a lot with regards to understanding the peace and victory of Christ, not just in a temporal sense. So I'm looking forward to getting a copy of your book, Steve. In fact, I do have, of course, a pre-copy already. But I just want to say that so everyone else feels a bit like that as well.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say just briefly is that I've been publishing the book on tongues on my Substack. I'll put the I'll put it's a blogging platform for those who don't know what Substack means. And so if you sign up there, if you are a person who doesn't have a lot of money, which I can absolutely appreciate at the moment, people are doing it tough financially. I have published I think 2/3 of the book already on Substack. You can just read it post by post, chunk by chunk. And I intend to do likewise with my book on eschatology. So I will sort of push a chapter out every 2 weeks, so you can sort of follow along and actually in the end read the entire book online if that's what you want to do. I'm not, I'm not in this to make money. Of course, if God so supplies the needs in that sense that I could stop writing software and just write books instead, I do it. But that's just what may or may not happen. But in the end, my desire is for people to learn the truth, and I'm not in it to make money.
No, that's great. Anyway, I'm just delighted that you've put your theological studies into more direct application, and thinking through, teasing things out, studying, and then writing it down and crystallizing thoughts like that is a great way of learning, and then sharing that learning with others. And I think you've got a very balanced approach to that. So enough of the gloss on patting Steve on the back at the moment from me, even though you are a dear brother and all that sort of stuff. Plans. Couple of plans, and then we might sign off. You've got a few videos in the pipeline, Steve. What
yeah, so I just released a short video on my own YouTube channel, which we will put onto the No Apologies channel.
Don't look there, everybody. Wait till it comes on the channel.
And so it's called Was Peter the First Pope? And I've actually recorded the second session as well, and it's called it's about apostolic succession, because they're kind of married together in one subject. And I think what we will do is put the two short videos together into one longer one and put them on the No Apologies channel, probably in a week's time.
Well, maybe you keep them separate. They're a bit shorter, and I think that's okay. It gives people a chance to digest it differently. But at the same time, I think you said you were looking at, these critiques of some of the baseline Catholic claims, because you could see a bit of a populist.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I mean,
coming back into Catholicism.
Well, you think of, conservative commentator Candace Owens as an example. I will say here that I don't necessarily, I'm not now endorsing everything she says or doesn't say, so don't take that in some ways the wrong. I'm not making any claims about what she says. She's a very well-known conservative commentator, and I was somewhat grieved by a podcast that she did where her husband, who is Roman Catholic, she married a Catholic, a fairly well-known guy who grew up an Anglican, then became Catholic, and she at this point was still calling herself a Protestant, and she had this debate with an American Presbyterian lady called, I think, Ali Beth Stuckey, where they debated. So it was her husband and Ali Beth were the either side of the debate, and Candace Owens was moderating the debate, and it was basically sort of, it was her time to ask any questions she could in order to ascertain should she become a Catholic or should she not. And it might have been helpful to have somebody who had a little bit more knowledge of Christian history, without wanting to be mean to Ali Beth Stuckey in her own.
No, you're not always prepared for every.
No, and look, in what she does a great job, I think. But
yeah.
But so one comment that this is what I wanted to raise. One comment. Sorry, I always go around circles in order to get to where I want to go.
He does. He really does.
Candace Owens said that she struggled with the idea that from the days of the early apostles all the way to Martin Luther, there were no Christians in the world. And I just my jaw dropped at this comment. I think, what? You can't be serious, as if you believe you have such a, I don't know, like childish sort of almost view of the church, as if to say there were no Christians. And clearly that, of course, also means that she's actually never engaged with anything that Martin Luther read, because Martin Luther, of course, unlike what sort of people I think commonly probably know about him who've never actually engaged with anything he said. He basically was, one of his major things was that he wants to go ad fontes, back to the source. And then he said, but look, the source is found in here, 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 here. And he would look at all the early church fathers. He'd go to Augustine. Then he'd go to, all the I'm struggling now to remember all the names that he would mention, but you'd go into the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th century. Like there's one chap that he mentioned in the 10th century in one of his books that fascinated me, that I bought an old copy of a book of a French theologian in the 10th century. So clearly he was a Catholic. There was nothing else then. And, setting aside this man's ideas on Mary and a few other things where he'd obviously got some wrong ideas.
Yeah.
If you read just simply what he said about Jesus and about justification by faith alone in Christ alone, you'd think you'd be reading one of the reformers. And yet this was a guy writing in the 10th century. And I think sadly, many Christians or let's say few Christians understand Christian history, which is very sad, because I think that then gives a very, very lopsided picture of the church.
It does help to know our history. Hey, look, I tell you what, we might wrap it and sign up for now. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We've had people coming and going, as you do in these live streams. It's great to be back in the saddle again. We know that
lots of things coming down the pipeline.
Lots of things coming down the pipeline. Check out those books. I'm going to see if I can I won't put any music on because I don't know. That'll probably upset everybody. I'm not quite sure what it sounds like when we talk over music. But thanks. It's good to be back. Just remember, what you need is Jesus. He's the Lord of all. All right, Steve, have a great day. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. It's been great. We promise to be more and more organized as the future goes on. Lovely to have you in the chat. Tell all your friends. I'm sure there'll be a prize, a free giveaway of one of Steve's books or something for the person in the next month or 2 months or 3 months who helps our subscribers get to 3,000. How about that? We'll keep a record. All right. Get out there, folks. It's great to have you.
Bye-bye.
Steve, thanks. We'll catch you later, mate.
Sayonara.
Bye-bye, everybody. God bless. Thanks for coming.